Hi, I'm Ksenia. I'm working for Artbeat Studio, and we're here to do a workshop with you today. For those of you who have not joined us for a workshop before or who just want to hear it again, Artbeat Studio facilitates the use of art for mental health. So one of the ways we do that is with our drop-in art center, Studio Central. And we are, of course, closed to the public at the moment because of the current restrictions in Manitoba because of COVID-19. So instead, we are doing some online workshops for you. So today, we're going to do some contour drawing, and contour is just a word for outline. We don't really need anything too special. You need something to draw on and something to draw with, and you need some things to draw. So I've grabbed like a pair of scissors, a Kleenex box, a house plant. I have a small elephant figurine here. So just things that are around. And we're going to do about 5 different types of contour drawings. So you could do that with 5 different objects, or you could use the same object for the whole time. And again, something to draw on and something to draw with. So we're going to start with just a sort of warm up kind of activity. Usually when I do these workshops, I've done like a test one beforehand to show you, but I have not drawn yet today, so this is going to be a real warm-up for me as well. So the first kind of contour drawing we're doing, and again, contour meaning outline, is one where we look at the object, but we do not look at our paper. Some people call this a blind contour. I haven't really found a better term for it. It's not really blind. You are still seeing things. You're just not looking at your own paper. So it's really about like feeling the outline of the object with your eyes as you go. So while we worked on gesture last week, if anyone joined us for that workshop, and if not, you can still access the recording on Facebook or on YouTube. That was all about capturing the form and the volume and the space that an object or a figure is taking up. So here we are looking at the form again, of course, but less concerned with the inner volume of the object and really just focusing on the outline. Despite this angle being a little bit sideways, you can understand the concept of contour and what we're doing here, and then do it with your own object. This is less of a like follow exactly what I'm doing step by step kind of workshop. So you're all intelligent people, and I'm pretty sure that you can extrapolate what's going on here from a side view. Okay, so you can use whatever materials you like. I'm gonna just grab a colored pen. I've got my object here, my scissors. And the very first thing I'm going to do is actually use my finger of my non-dominant hand, my non-drawing hand, to sort of trace the outline, just to look at what that outline is. So I'm just gonna sort of put it here. I'm thinking about what the outline is. And of course, when you're not looking at your paper, you're not going to pick your pen up off the paper and start drawing a line again, because of course you're not going to know where it is in relation to anything else. So the next thing I'm going to do, and you don't have to do this for every single drawing, but it's a great warm-up and sort of getting yourself reacquainted. I'm going to synchronize my 2 hands, so my drawing hand and my non-drawing hand, and I'm going to do that outline again, this time just sort of imagining drawing it on the paper with my drawing hand. And now I'm going to do the same thing one more time, but I'm actually going to put pen to paper. So I'm not sure how well you can see my non-drawing hand tracing, but you get the idea. So here we go. Okay. So it's kind of a pair of scissors, right? Obviously not photorealistic because I haven't been looking down, but I definitely got the outline in there, and I got all the pieces of the scissors that I was concerned about getting. I really wanted to draw like a little screw in the middle, and the holes in the handles. So all of that happened. I'm going to draw this one more time really quick. And this is kind of a fun, interesting compositional thing. I like to use another color and then draw the same object basically on top of the one that I've already done. And then see, whether I've drawn it the same way or a different way. It's of course totally optional. It's just an activity I like to do. So let's try drawing our first object one more time using our synchronized tracing fingers. There we go. That turned out more accurately than I would have expected, actually. But there we have my two pairs of scissors atop each other. And they turned out quite similar. That's not always the case, but you never know. So I found actually using my other finger to trace helped me be a lot more accurate than I often am when I'm doing a contour without looking at my paper. So that may be something that helps you out. And if it's, of course, something that's like too hard for you to coordinate or confusing to you, then don't do it. Then just use your eyes and your one drawing hand. Here's my plant. You can imagine it, but you'll be looking at something of your own for your drawing anyway, so I'm not going to be so concerned that you can't quite see my plant. I promise you I'm not making it up. You can trust me. And I'll show you my paper here. So for this one, again, I'm using like the same idea, but I'm not going to trace it with my finger. I'm just going to try to sort of feel the outline with my eyes and put my other hand away and see what happens. The other thing to do as well is, there's an awful lot going on in this plant. I think I'm going to be concerned with a certain section of it. I'll be concerned with this section of the plant just to keep it manageable. And it's totally fine to decide not to draw your whole subject that's in front of you. You're allowed to change your mind and make different decisions as you go, obviously, but as an exercise, it's better to decide what the scope of your composition is and then to draw that scope. All right, back down to the paper we go. And I'm going to start with this leaf up here. Again, I'm looking at the plant, but I'm not looking at my paper. Those two leaves kind of overlap. Down here. So that's sort of all the leaves that I had planned to look at, but I do want to get the pot in there. All right, let's do a little comparison. So we have a plant that I plan to draw half of, and we have the image of the plant that I drew half of. So it actually, looks fairly plant-like. The leaves sure do overlap a lot more in my drawing than they do in real life, but again, that's fine. This is really a warm-up for your drawing hand and for your observational skills with your eye. I'm gonna start with the pot this time though and see how that goes. I'm using pen. I've said before that one of my personal deals with drawing is that I can get very in my head and a little bit precious about it. And when you warm up, you don't want to be precious about it. So to use pen instead of pencil takes away any temptation I have to be like, oops, that was a mistake and I don't like it and I want to take it away. So I use something that I can't erase. Here we go. And there we go. So I've got the orange plant that I drew on top. So that's one type of contour where we look at the object and we don't ever look at our paper. The next one that we're going to do is very similar. It's a little bit of a modified contour. So what a modified contour is it's something where you still are looking at your object most of the time, but you are allowed to look at your paper. So depending on who you ask, some people say you spend 90% of your time looking at the object and 10% of the time at your paper. Some say you should look at your object like 3/4 of the time and at your paper 1/4 of the time. No more than half. You should spend at least half the time you're drawing looking at the object. But there's no like king of contour who's going to come and tell you you broke the law and behead you for looking at your paper 15% of the time. But I would say that as an exercise, try to be looking at your object at least half of the time. So we're going to do this one in a continuous line, which is very similar to what we did. My pen didn't come off the paper out of necessity. And now we're like doing it on purpose. So I've got this little elephant figurine and we are going to try to draw her in one line. You are, of course, allowed to go back over your line if you want to, but some people might find it a good challenge to try to do one outline without stopping, without going back. So you can interpret that however it means to you, and I'm going to do it as a modified single line contour, modified continuous line, meaning that I'm going to look at my paper sometimes, but at least half the time I'm going to be looking at our elephant friend. So I'm just sort of like flicking my eyes down to the paper when I'm doing something that I feel like needs a look, like when I'm going sort of around one of the like 3-dimensional areas that I can see, but I'm really trying to keep my eye on the elephant. Here we go up around the back. And here's the time I'm looking at my paper to get that other leg in. And back to the elephant. Head and trunk. So, I'm not sure that I quite captured the elephant. There's something about the bottom of the head that feels a little funny to me, but actually when I look at it now, it's a little closer than I would have thought. So something that's interesting is it turned out to be about the same size as the elephant did. So let's talk about size of drawing for a second. It is very easy when especially if we're like trying something new or like really thinking about it, to draw quite small. There's nothing wrong with a beautiful small drawing, but it can be very freeing and scary, but really good for our technique and our practice to draw something big. It doesn't have to be 2 feet wide, but try not to be like super like mincing and small with the details. Let's just be a little freer and to feel those shapes and sort of understand the line more. So I'm going to give this elephant one more shot, and I'm going to try to draw it bigger than it is in real life. I'm going to try to look at my paper, not very much, but I am allowed to look at it. So right here, I'm flicking my eye downwards. And continuous line, so that's the inside of the mouth. It's the chin. I might run off the page here actually, because I tried to make it bigger. Which is okay, because again, warm-ups and practice and technique. I think my issue here is I'm not actually making the elephant wide enough. I want to go back down and make another leg. Come up over the back. A little bit of like a dent in the head there that I want to capture. Back up to the trunk. I'm going to put the eye in just for reference. So, we can tell it's an elephant. It was quite quick. We can tell that that's the same figure, roughly. as our friend. Not the most photorealistic accurate thing in the world, but has a lot of value for understanding those lines. And what I've understood from my drawing now is that I think I actually have a fairly good idea of the flow of the lines and the shape of the elephant. What I haven't quite grasped in these quick drawings is like the proportion and how far things are from each other. So this is a great first step. And if I was spending an hour doing like a study of this little elephant, which could be quite fun, and could be like a nice way to spend an hour and to be working on my creative practice. I am going to move forward just so that we can try some different ways to do contours. But you could take this as like your first step and then try like another continuous modified where you're, spending a little more time on the proportion, and taking it a little slower. And then you could do one where you're allowed to lift your pencil off and take a little more time and more detail and keep sort of layering until you've done the elephant like 10 times and then you've finally made your way to a finished drawing. So that's totally a legitimate way to move through this process. I'm just trying a bunch of different objects to sort of show you different ways, and what different objects might like bring to the practice that you're doing with contour drawing. So now we're going to do a modified non-continuous drawing, which, surprise, is almost exactly the same thing, except you're allowed to lift up your pen. So again, the modified drawing being that you are trying to look at your object as much as or more than your paper. But you can sort of lift up your pen or pencil and go to where you need to go to. So for this one, for this Kleenex, I'm going to try starting it in pencil because I want to be like a little more accurate with this. And I'm just going to glance over at the screen and see how it's showing up. And if not, I'll switch to pen. Pencil is great. I'm probably going to draw a little darker than I normally personally would. I would probably like sketch things in a little bit lightly when I'm trying to be quite accurate. But to allow you to see better in this workshop, I'm gonna really push that pencil in and leave a darker mark, which you do not have to do because you are not filming yourself. So draw with the pressure that makes sense to you, but I'm gonna start sort of a medium pressure. So I'm going to start with this line here. Now this Kleenex box is geometric, so I can look at it. It's not an organic shape until we get to the tissue. So I can look and see what shapes do I recognize as geometry. So this is a rectangle. It's a bit slanted because I have the Kleenex box on an angle. But I'm like, that's cool. That's nice and easy. I know how to draw a rectangle. So that can be a way to give yourself some confidence in a more complicated piece. What can you see in it that's a shape that you know? Of course, the side of a box is another rectangle, which really is slanted. I guess it's kind of like a, I don't know if it's a parallelogram when it's, I don't think it is because the ends are still vertical. I'm just having some trouble deciding my angles here. Let's say this is maybe a little longer than it should be proportionally. So again, like you can see, I'm not going that slow. My goal is not to have like the masterpiece of the world's most accurate Kleenex box, but it is to be somewhat accurate. So I do want to be a little bit concerned with the proportion, but not so concerned that I'm like measuring things. So because of these rectangles, this line and this line should be going in the same direction. This one is not as vertical as I would like it, and that's why that looks a little wonky. I am definitely looking down at my picture a little more than I'd like to be. So now that I've got that sort of blocked in, I can do some of the other shapes that are involved. Corner's a little off. Okay, now we want to get into this top bit. So this is like the serrated edge where you've pulled the cardboard off, and then this side is smooth. And this is serrated again. I'm not looking at my paper at all right now. Just sort of following the edge of the Kleenex box. And I'm glancing down at my paper and seeing that I think maybe I went a little too far, so let's make that loop go here. And then this part is implied, but it's blocked off by an actual Kleenex, so I'm just going to sort of sketch that in very light so that I know it's there, but I'm not going to make it darker, obviously. And then I'm just going to fix this because I wobbled because I was not looking at my paper. Okay, and then I'm gonna, this is the part where I can really not look at the paper, which is nice. For the sort of geometric things, like, we get it, you've got to look down to try to figure out what that proportion is. I'm just gonna, something about this that is still a little bit different than what I would like it to be. Let's try that. So for this, obviously, I'm looking at the paper. It can be actually, not to give yourself pressure, but it can be quite good to time yourself. For the gesture drawings, I suggested like using a timer that sort of would beep, like to say you have 30 seconds to draw this gesture. And for this, rather than give yourself an end time and say I have 30 seconds to draw this Kleenex box, which is kind of crazy, or to say I'm going to draw this Kleenex box for 5 minutes, that's totally something you can do. But it might be interesting just to time yourself how long it takes from start to finish, and then you can see whether you can get faster or what kind of accuracies you have when you draw for different lengths of time. But rather than like let the time dictate how long you draw for, just draw and then check the clock and be like, oh, that's what a 10-minute drawing looks like for me. So this is a little bit more fun for me because now I'm not looking at my paper so much, and I'm drawing like all the little sort of dents in the Kleenex box, and I'm letting my eyes or in the Kleenex tissue itself, pardon me. I'm letting my eyes like follow that line. This could be somewhere where I could use my non-dominant hand as well to like trace those outlines if I wanted to. And so I'm doing some of these lines continuously, but I am picking up my pencil, checking in with my paper to see where I'm off to. See, this feels like the end of the Kleenex. So the Kleenex is taller than the box actually from my angle. On top here, come down around that edge, and the Kleenex so it disappears in that way underneath. And because this is a contour drawing, we're not using shading to determine the darker areas or the lighter areas. We're not going to use tone in this one. But what I can do, I'm just erasing those implied lines that I mentioned before that I can't actually see, but I was just using to help me understand where the things were as landmarks. So I've got this, you can't see it super well because I drew it fairly lightly. I've got this Kleenex. So now I can actually use my line darkness or my line weight to show where the light and the shadows are. So I can press harder to make a darker line, or I can go back over it to make a thicker line. And this also provides emphasis. Like if you were drawing, I don't know, a pair of shoes, and you really wanted us to like look at the laces and then everything else was sort of like less important. You can use your line weights and your like darkness or lightness to emphasize as well. So I'm going to quite emphasize the edge of the Kleenex, and then I'm going to find a few areas that I think can benefit from being brought out to show us that it's darker over here, or lighter over here. See how that's sort of showing up on the screen a little better, and I will turn my paper and give you a look. So up here, I want this line darker, but not necessarily thicker. Whereas on the sides of the tissue, I'd like those lines thicker. And once this is completed, again, you could start to bring in your other techniques. You could spend a lot of time on a Kleenex. And again, it could be a really interesting exercise. But you could, once your contour is finished, of course, add shading in different ways and things like that. But that's not in the scope of today's workshop. Perhaps another time we will talk about tone and shading. All right, let's address this box again and its lines. So I've got like a lot of double lines going on right now, which is like perfectly acceptable for a sketch. Not as ideal for a finished product necessarily. Like a contour, you know, would ideally have like one nice, clean, accurate line. So I'm going to try to like make a final decision about where these lines are going. And this part has gotten quite dark when really like the little flap on the Kleenex box, you can see that from your view, is actually like not that emphasized. So I needed to go over it a few times to find the placement of it I liked, which is totally fine. But now I am sort of lightening that. The edge of the box, too important. And then of course you could do you know, again, if you wanted to, you can take another step and do your do the pattern that's on the box. Things like that. I get a little squirrely when I'm trying to draw something realistic. I much prefer in like my own practice, like a sort of quick and dirty sketch first that then I work on in layers afterwards. I sort of mentioned that in the gesture workshop. So, you know, jumping right into this Kleenex box, perhaps I personally might have been better served doing some blind contours and some other contours of just this Kleenex box first before I got into it for some different versions. But again, I wanted to explore some different ways of doing things with you. So it is up to you whether you want to take steps first or jump right into something. So here's our Kleenex box. And here's my drawing of a Kleenex box. So, you know, there's things about it where I'm like, oh, I don't know how accurate such and such is, but you really do get the impression of the Kleenex being soft and being folded and having different areas in it by use of the line weight. You may recall again from the gestures, I had taken some images of people from magazines because we didn't have a real person in front of us to draw some figures. So I'm going to look at some images again and look at the contour. And specifically, I'm interested in how can we do a contour that gives us like a quick idea of a face and a quick idea of the clothing. The reason I'm doing this is because I've got something in the works for a future workshop that's going to involve combining gesture and contour for the human figure. So I just want to touch on this while we're doing some contours. So I've got two figures here. I've got this person meditating, and they've got lots of lovely wrinkles like in the pants that they're wearing and things like that. And I've got this person in this long coat that's moving, which is really great. This is something that you can do with a photo or a magazine cutout or a printout. And I'm using a light table. You can use a thin enough paper that you can see through it, or you can stick your image to a window and hold your paper up in front of it. Or as I said, if you've got an extra person kicking around that you want to practice drawing a contour of, as long as they're happy to stay still for a little bit, then great, you got it made. So this is like a quick contour. Obviously, if I'm tracing, I could trace everything very accurately. But I'm not really doing this as like a tracing class. This is a way for us to practice our observation and decide like what is important for us. So as I said, I really want to capture like the folds in her pants. I want to give some impression of her face and her like serene expression. So contour again, concerned with outline. So I'm gonna look at some outline. And of course, if you're drawing a real person, then you're going to decide what's important there as well. So I'm not drawing every single strand of hair. I'm sort of subdividing the figure into little blocks, and I'm like, here's a block of hair, and here's an outline of the face. So that's sort of where a line goes. Constantly thinking about it as not as the object. This is something that can help if you're, you know, a little scared of realism. Try not to think like I'm drawing a person, I'm drawing a plant, I'm drawing a Kleenex box. Try to just be like with that Kleenex box, I see a rectangle here. I know how to draw a rectangle. This is going here and this is going there. Let's follow this wrinkle, follow it with my eye. Where does that go? And the accuracy of if you're looking at all the shapes and all the components of the object, then the object has no choice but to be pretty accurate by the time you're finished. And of course, we all have things that we're, you know, not better at, but like more inclined to see right away. Like it takes practice to think about proportion. It takes practice to draw anything. So, you know, it's not just like, oh, just pay attention and your sketch will be perfect. Like sometimes our brain and our eyes need to work to communicate what is really happening and what we're really seeing there. And that's why we practice. But really, if you do break something down into its shapes or into its components, and you draw those components in an accurate arrangement, then your drawing has to be accurate. It's just like, it can't not be. So for these wrinkles, sort of want to outline some of the patches, and I want to get some of the deeper ones by just making my lines darker and thicker, like we talked about. As I said, I'm partly doing the tracing just so that we can focus on something that then we don't worry about proportion. Like we know that her knee is this far from her arm because it's literally there and we're tracing it. And it's also just for like ease of the workshop presentation. So I would recommend you try this as a practice way to think about shapes and edges and breaking things down. But I do recognize that like a full contour would involve me seeing something in life and drawing it, or even seeing the picture and having the picture in front of me rather than tracing it. I'm gonna have to fix up those feet. So for the face, like again, I have the power with the tracing to like make it super, super accurate and to draw exactly what she looks like, but I'm just like picking out the important parts. So I'm like, the eyes are closed, so it's important for me to draw there. There's like some shadow here, so I really want to capture that. So there's her eyebrows, which are one thing, but it's also like the shadow at the side of her nose. Nostrils and the sort of the edge of her nose show me that her nose is pointed up. And then this expression, again, I don't have to trace the whole lip. I can just sort of grab what I feel like are the important parts. So here we have my sitting, meditating person. So again, it's not going to fool anybody into thinking it's a photo. But we can see the wrinkles in her pants. We can see the shirt. So there's like a little sense of not necessarily movement, but that like things have moved and settled. We get an idea of what the haircut is. We get an idea of the expression on the face. Cool, so let's get the contour of this figure. And again, with the tracing, that's just gonna help me sort of see her outward shape without worrying about her proportions. So she's got this dark hair and this dark coat, so they really like go into each other, which is kind of neat. I think her particular hairstyle is kind of fun, so I wanted to capture that a little bit. This coat has like this long, luxurious kind of hood that comes around. And I can't see everything in this trace because there is something, you know, on the back of this magazine, so that it comes through the page. So I'm just going to trace like this contour outline here, and then I'm going to take the paper off and we can look at what other lines we might want to contour to give the whole story. But I will look at her face. So she's got like this radiant smile. So again, eyes, I'm not going to worry about like drawing the top of the eye and the bottom of the eye and the lash line. I'm actually just sort of shading in the eyes to be like, yeah, there's a shadow there. Because of course our eyes go in, so we're going to get a shadow. And that's a technique you can use when you're drawing somebody quickly. Try and get the placement of their eyes and like the rough shape of their eyes, and then just sort of like color in that shape. So this is my trace, and it gives us the idea that like a person is walking and they've got like this flowing thing. And now I'm going to look at use my powers of observation, and I'm going to look at my image, and I'm going to put in the lines for the contour that I think are important. And I'm going to try and get that sense of, try and be a little bit accurate about where they fall so that the sizing, you know, makes sense. And that's the edge of the coat there. So we know that comes to here. So actually then this actually comes down lower than that. Again, you are allowed to spend as much time on these as you want. I'm going a little quick in the interest of not doing a 2-hour-long workshop where you watch me do lines. Got a pocket here. I think this is actually from something coming through the back of the page. So this coat is a little bit oversized, I think. Like, I think that maybe the sleeves are perhaps a little long for this person, maybe. So I really want to capture the wrinkliness of the sleeve as it's like pushed up. That all sort of gets stuffed in the pocket. Won't all fit in there. And again, like costume designer, so I'm interested in where are the seams? If I can see a seam on a piece of clothing, I want to indicate that. You might have other priorities, right? Because that's the thing with art, is that we could all be drawing the same thing and our interests will come through. So I am going to pay a little more attention to the clothes, because that's like the thing that I, you know, am trained to focus on, the thing that my brain goes to. How would somebody sew this costume? So where do we need to put a seam for them? You might want to spend a lot more time on her face or her hair, or like maybe the texture of the fabric is really interesting to you. And so again, like this I want to emphasize because it's like a dark area there. There's some swirly lines that come up and through. Don't need to be as dark as far as I'm concerned. They're not as deep, but I do want to show them. Her feet, she's like crossing them over here. Don't even know if we'll finish the feet right now. I'm gonna say that's not my priority. Let it fade out. Not that I necessarily advocate avoiding parts of things that are hard. I think you should just maybe, you know, spend a little more time on them. But as I always say, if something's giving you angst, like this is not the end of the world. You just leave that and move on. And you actually can't see her. I think she must be wearing a turtleneck or something, but you can't really see the edge of her hair. There's like a little shadow where it's maybe implied, but like her neck and everything are just not there at all. I'm gonna show where the light is really catching that. This is like quite a shadow. Got a shadow in there. I'm gonna do a thick edge on this collar as well. And this is all quite smooth and this is shadowed. So let's put an edge on the actual coat. And then it's to the back, so that's less important maybe. And there we go. So here's our image of our model walking with, oh, you know what, I am going to actually put this in. Okay, because I really like that. Okay, there we go. There's our image of our model walking. And there's our contour drawing of our model walking. So the things that I thought were the most important in this image were like the motion of the coat and an expression. So I've emphasized that with thicker, darker, bolder lines. The last type of contour drawing that I want to explore with you is called a cross contour. And so this uses lines that go across the object you're drawing to show some of that volume and the shape. So this is where we like almost bleed into the gesture a little bit. You may remember that we did some gestures last time where it was sort of this kind of motion as we were like, well, you know, this person's arm is round, so I want to get round lines that capture that. So this is a little bit more calculated, but then you can use straight lines or curved lines or what have you to give the idea of how the object is shaped. So I'm going to use this teacup, and it's pretty fun actually. I don't know how easily you can tell there, but it goes like bump, bump, bump. You can see my finger going across it. It's not like a cylinder. So my lines are going to replicate that. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do for me personally, again, this is gonna be like a quickish sketch to demo the technique. Ooh, that's too, so that's the part where like I was really looking at my object, which is great, but my hand was going a little wild there on the paper. So I wanna make sure that I am being a little bit accurate. So these bumps are not too, like they're visible, but they're not huge, not too extreme. That's the word I'm looking for. 1, 2, 3. Let's join this up properly. So I've got like 1, 2, 3 bumps, and I guess this would actually come out as a bump and in. And then we'd have 1, 2, 3 bumps. There we go. Again, you know, you can spend a lot more time on it. I just want to give you the idea of this technique. So I can see like one of the bumps of the cup coming here, and then another that joins like upwards quite an interesting cup. It's a good challenge. Could have done like a whole workshop on drawing cups with bumps in them. So I'm using lines to sculpt the edges of my cup. And they all come to a round base. And then there's a little base there. So these are like sort of the, I don't know if you think of them as like the ribs of the cup. Those are things I can see, I can observe. Of course, nothing round really ends. Continue through. You have to be careful that you're not drawing what your brain thinks is there. My brain's like, oh, it's on a little pedestal, I should do a line there, but that's not what's there. What's there is actually a circle that disappears into the rest of the cup. Okay, so this is again a rough shape, but what I know is that inside this cup it's fairly round, so I can use curved lines. This is almost like if you were given this cup and you were given a bunch of wire and you had to like make a frame of the cup that then you were going to put like paper mache on or glue stretch fabric over. What are the lines that the wire would need to be to support your cup? This way I'm getting those little bumps coming around. This should actually be like that, I think. Again, we're refining. We're not held to what we've drawn before. We're constantly going, how can I make this a little cleaner and a little more accurate? I've got those bumps, like bump, 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 sculpting around it. And then down here, it actually gets quite narrow. So I'm going to imply that, some of these contours. And then this bump comes around this way. This is a little bump all its own. And we kind of have, to me, this part actually sort of goes in from my angle. And then I've got the handle on there. So again, I'm just sort of sketching a little bit. Ooh. Finding that balance between looking at the object and looking at my paper. Okay, so there's a sketch of the handle a little bit. This would come down, and then we'd see inside the handle. And this handle is rounded. I suppose too, what you could do is draw the lines, like draw this framework and then put the outline of the object in afterwards. If that worked better for you, if that made more sense. Okay, and then at the bottom here, get it one more time for accuracy. All right, so this is a quick cross-contoured version of a cup. Again, if you're going for accuracy, I would spend some more time on it. But I also recognize that we've been contouring for an hour, so this is just an intro to another kind of contour that you may wish to use in your practice or in your art. So that was our whirlwind tour of the world of contour. So we did contours where we looked only at the object and not at our paper. We did contours where we looked at the object for half the time we were drawing or more, and we looked at our paper for half the time we were drawing or less, whatever that means to you. And we did that both with a continuous line or with being able to pick up our pen or pencil from the paper. So that was a modified contour. Then we just looked at doing a sort of modified contour of a figure. And for that, we used tracing as a tool and then observed the areas that we wanted to emphasize and de-emphasize. And finally, we did a cross contour, which involves drawing the volume or the shapes within a framework of your object rather than just an outline. This is like an outline of the imaginary frame. So that was a lot, but I hope that you maybe learned something or were reminded of something or found a tool that can help you in your warm-ups or in your practice or in your finished art. I'm very excited to combine some ideas about gesture and contour and movement next week. So stay tuned for that and for all of the other workshops done by my fabulous Artbeat colleagues. Thank you so much. Stay safe and have a great day.